Hello, this is Jane Goodall. Thank you for inviting me to share a few words with you. As you all know, we're living in dark times, politically, socially, and especially environmentally, where we're faced with the twin threats of climate change and loss of biodiversity. And we're also battling with a pandemic. And all of this, of course, we brought upon ourselves by our disrespect of nature and animals. It's so important to realize that we're part of and depend on the natural world for clean air, water, food, well, everything. But it's healthy ecosystems that we depend on. In the forests of Gombe, I learned how everything was interconnected, each plant and animal species playing its role. And as more species become locally extinct, this can have a devastating effect on the whole ecosystem and may in fact lead to ecosystem collapse. People are finally waking up to the damage we're inflicting on the planet. There are rewilding programs in many countries, and sometimes species that have become locally extinct have been successfully reintroduced. The best example of how the reintroduction of key species can regenerate a damaged ecosystem is provided by the reintroduction of wolves and bison into the Yellowstone area. I suspect most of you are familiar with that story. It's a wonderful story. As well, people are starting to realize how industrial agriculture, especially factory farms, is devastating the environment and causing massive loss of biodiversity. The need for regenerative farming, permaculture, and so on is becoming more widely recognized. When I began the chimp research in 1960, the Gombe National Park was part of the Great Forest Belt that stretched across equatorial Africa. But when I flew over the area in the late 1980s, I was shocked to see the park was just a tiny island of forest surrounded by bare hills. There were more people living there than the land could support. They were cutting down trees to get more land for farming or to make money from charcoal or timber. They were desperately trying to live. And I realized if we didn't help them to find ways of living without destroying their environment, we couldn't save chimps, forests, or anything else. This led to the very holistic program that we called Takari, that began in 1994. From the start, we worked with village leaders to improve health and education facilities and to regenerate the degraded farmland without the use of chemical pesticides and herbicides. And we provided microcredit opportunities for villagers to start their own environmentally sustainable small businesses. And we provided scholarships for girls so that women had a chance for secondary education. Once people realized that we cared about them and that protecting the environment is not only for wildlife but also their own health and future, they became our partners in conservation. They've stopped farming on the steep slopes and greatly reduced erosion. They've also reduced cutting down of trees. And gradually trees have grown back from seeds and roots that were left in the ground. And insects, birds and mammals have returned. We use the Takari method of community-led conservation in 6 other African countries where we work. Our research team at Gombe includes a veterinarian, and we monitor the health of not only the chimpanzees and baboons, but also of the people and livestock in the surrounding villages. In other words, we've been employing the One Health concept that formalizes what has long been known, that animal health, human health, and the health of the environment are interdependent, and the health of one affects the health of all. For example, Streams contaminated with pathogens from human or livestock in the villages flow through the national park and pose health hazards for both animals and humans working in the park. Some animals, such as baboons and bush pigs, may move out of the park to raid crops, and they may infect domestic animals. As you all know, more than 70% of all new human diseases are zoonotic in origin. And it's not only that viruses, bacteria, and so on can spill over to humans, where they may create new diseases, such as HIV, AIDS, Ebola, MERS, avian influenza, and almost certainly COVID-19. But this can also work the other way round, with human pathogens spilling over to animals. Gorillas and chimpanzees, with their close genetic makeup to humans, are particularly susceptible to human diseases, and they should be treated with extra care by veterinary services, wildlife authorities, and researchers. And of course, this applies to orangutans and to a lesser extent other primates too. And finally, wild animals can infect domestic animals and vice versa. The treatment of disease in wild animals has become increasingly important, especially for those species which are so endangered and breed slowly. And I want to recognize the part played by a number of the best zoos, because they provide veterinarians with the opportunity to work with captive wild animals and then share their knowledge with vets working in the field. And very often they train those vets in the zoo. Obviously, as human populations move ever further into wildlife habitat, taking their livestock and dogs with them, it's increasingly important for collaboration between veterinarians who are working with domestic animals and those working with wildlife, and doctors, human doctors, who are treating diseases that can infect both humans and animals, clearly need to collaborate with veterinarians working with domestic and/or wild animals. The OIE Wildlife Health Framework is working within the human-animal ecosystem interface to study animal pathogens, detect and manage wildlife disease, and share information with the relevant people in an effort to reduce the risk of further spillovers to humans. Finally, I hope that this conference will be very successful and provide a wonderful opportunity for sharing information to the benefit of all. Thank you.